What up?
How are you? Welcome to the Open Door Podcast. The Open Door Podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and
I am your other host, Levi.
And we are super happy that you're here for our third episode, but it's really episode 2. The first one was an introduction.
Yeah. So that doesn't count.
Yeah, you guys, again, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, we were talking right before this that Andy has a requirement of
Yes.
video counts, and we have to have 10 views on each one to get more videos out.
I will continue to do this.
Yeah.
As long as we continue to get at least 10.
Yeah. We might bump the number up. 15 is the next one coming up. So, but it's working because we have, I think, like 27 at least amount.
Not that I don't care about the one. If there's just one person that's hey,
yeah.
Andy, Levi, I'm really curious about this message. I'll meet with you guys individually.
Yeah.
Because that's how much you mean to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, anyways, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Regardless.
On Spotify or YouTube.
Spotify, YouTube.
Indeed.
Subscribe, I'll ask you one more time, but that's it. I don't want to beat you guys up over it. But hey, shall we get into today?
We should. What are we talking about today, Andy?
Yeah. So today, we're going over last Sunday's message, and it was really on my heart because I feel we've been focusing. The week prior, we were really focusing on loving people well and being kind to people around us. Maybe in the past couple weeks, and I kind of felt it on my heart that I wanted people to not to do that. I wanted them to do it, but not to do it at the detriment of their own self. And I think sometimes, I know myself, and I know a lot of people I've spoken to, sometimes they will continue to do more, help more, love more, but inside they haven't taken enough for themselves. They haven't, and I gave this kind of a illustration of an airplane when it starts to get turbulence or you get in an accident. The first thing they tell you is put the mask, and the oxygen mask comes down. The first thing they tell you is put the mask on yourself because before the person next to you, because if you're panicked, if you're really no help to someone else.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to spend a week in that. So yeah, that's basically what we talked about this week. So so what I did was I wanted to be really interactive with the students. So if you guys that were here, you'll notice I had the whiteboard out, and I said, all right, guys, we've been talking about this, but we also need to talk about our own, how do we sustain our own self? How do we safeguard our own hearts? And I basically just asked them, I said, all right, do you guys tell me what are some things that bother you? What are some things that you have to safeguard your heart from? What are some things that creep in and take that space in your heart to where you really can't love others well, and you really can't outreach to others. You really can't do that. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No.
Okay.
Not really. Not really.
That's okay. Just jump in when you want, because I'll just continue to go
absolutely.
through.
You're good. I'll jump in whenever.
So going on, it was like, we're also aware of our physical health, our emotional health. It's a big thing. Like, how's your emotional health? Are you taking mental rest? What are we doing spiritually to ensure that spiritually we're taking care of ourselves, we're safeguarding ourselves spiritually? Because the only real way we can love like Jesus wants us to love is to have Him kind of be the king of our hearts, have Him in there, and unfortunately, sin has a way, our own doubts have a way, anxiety has a way to creep into our hearts and start taking up our free time and it kind of it feels like it rots the soul because it's an icky feeling. When we let things like fear, guilt, insecurities, anxieties, when they come in and they hit us all, but when they come in, we tend to focus on that, and it tends to take over. So what can we do when those things start to creep in. And that's really what I wanted to focus on, is in order to love others and be that light in a dark world, how do we safeguard our hearts against those things?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like a good way to start on that one would, for me at least, would just to bring up like from a biblical perspective on this.
Yeah.
Like bringing up, I think Trent also brought it, which I was a little irritated because I was thinking of it first. When he
Yeah.
said it. And I remember looking at him and being like, "You did this," but the Bible said it first before both of us. So, but in like Proverbs 4:23, it's like, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
Yep.
I know in some translations it says the wellspring of life flows from it.
Yeah.
And like I like the wellspring of life example because like you're talking about like Jesus loving other people. Jesus is life. Like the life he brings us is the true, like what we need to like maintain.
Right.
And it says to guard your heart, like to maintain the thing that life comes from. Like in order to branch out to other people, you have to keep your heart guarded.
Yeah.
And it can be in anywhere. Like it can happen in the church, it can happen out of the church, it can happen everywhere. And so like keeping that verse on hand, like that's one that goes through my head like on a daily is guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
And that's really, that's a perfect scriptural example, because and that's why the next section of the session was asking the students. I got one of them to come up here, and I was like, I want you guys to tell me what are some things that attack you? Yeah. What are some things that, and I wish the board was still, if we still had it up, I'd love to have it up, but some of the big, a lot of them were like schoolwork, friends, relationships. But the big things were things like insecurity, anxiety, anger was a big one.
Comparison.
Comparison.
I don't know if that one was up there, but that's
no, it definitely.
That's one that comes to my head.
Fear. Sometimes guilt. We get in this cycle of guilt because we do have that, and it just becomes a shame thing. Even things like envy and greed. And I wanted examples from everyone, because a lot of times, especially students, they don't admit to these things until they hear someone else is dealing with the same thing. And they're like, you know what, I deal with that too. It's not just me. And then someone else will say something else. And then so by the time this happens for, 2, 3, 4 minutes, the entire group is kind of, they're keyed in because something that someone said really hit a nerve. So once that's there and everyone's kind of like keyed in and they're like, yeah, and something on the board is something that attacks their heart, I then go, okay, this is something I can tell that you guys all deal with. But then I ask, why do we insist as a culture, why do we insist as people on dealing with these things ourselves? Why is it? What is it about these things? When we know that the King of Heavens, that we know that the King of Kings, that Jesus is on our side, why do we continue to see these things and deal with them ourselves?
Yeah.
And I think culture has a big say in that. Because think of all the you're a young man. Think about all the things that when you're when you have stuff, what do they tell you?
Yeah. Well, one, like right now, like putting down men is a big one. But if we're talking about culture, like in terms of like things to be insecure about, like we're kind of shifting more towards like being a traditional man is something to be insecure about. Like being, like even just being a believer in this time is just a little, like it's almost frowned upon. Like it's always been semi-frowned upon, but
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like being a man, like that's a struggle, like as is, and then you go even further into like scrolling on Instagram, like both dark humor and like explicit stuff, like that's one that like really hits nowadays. Is you'll be scrolling through and somebody uses like explicit like images or something to sell an AI product. That's one thing I
Yeah.
found on there like recently. And I was like, dude, like what is happening? So yeah, no, absolutely. When you're talking about like culture being like, I guess semi like pressured into that, like
Yeah.
that's a big one right there. So
Well, culture kind of, I think it creates a lot of these things, but I think it tells us, when we do suffer from these things, because
absolutely.
it's,
Yeah.
anxiety, depression, fear, all these things, insecurity. But a lot of times it's like the solution is to deal with it.
Oh
This-
yeah, like dealing it with it
Yeah.
solo is like, no, it's your problem. Deal with your
Yeah,
problem.
fix it.
Or put it on other people.
Yeah.
That's another one that and not like in a healthy way either, because you can put like rest your problems on people.
Yeah.
Like, and not like in a horrible way. You don't want to like walk over and drop things off on them. Like, but like coming to them for help. Like that's acceptable, I think.
You said that is acceptable?
Yeah, just coming to people for help, but like just
I think
dropping your
sometimes, yeah.
dropping your problem on them though is where you have the little disconnect. 'Cause
Yeah.
like there's either doing it on your own, which is not good, and then there's doing it and dropping it off on somebody else, which isn't good. But like
I think-
having support is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it is a good thing, but I think we kind of, as a culture, I think we glamorize people that can
Yeah.
deal
Yeah.
with
That's a good good word
issues
on that.
they faced their fears,
Mm-hmm.
they dealt with their anxiety, they dealt with their insecurity, and they just walked it off, or they manned up.
Yeah.
Or one thing that my wife likes to say, put your big curl pants on.
Yeah. I put
it's-
my big girl pants
It's,
on.
but it's like that's kind of, so the students are dealing with this. Obviously, they admitted so, and it's not just this group. I've talked to many groups, not just students, adults. Everyone deals with these things, and culture's like, yeah, those things are real, but just deal with them. Just
Yeah.
suck it up, just walk it off, or just dump it on someone else.
Yeah.
Or, make
Or-
it someone else's problem.
Or another thing that I've caught myself doing, and I just thought about this as we were talking, but like I've caught myself saying, like as a believer, because I assume we're gonna get into the verses where you're kind of like
Yeah.
like pushing it onto God as well. Like that's the person we need to bring those problems to.
Yeah.
But like I have found myself like almost desensitizing myself to things.
Okay.
Like a little bit about me, like my struggle with pornography in high school.
Right.
Like when I got to like college, I convinced myself that I was okay with telling everyone that was a believer, and that was for the purpose of me and not the purpose of God.
Right.
And so like I was like, oh, if I'm comfortable enough to tell people about what mistakes I made in the past, like then I'm comfortable now. But I was totally lying to myself, because you can't really, you desensitize yourself to it. That's not healthy either. And you're not really dumping it on God as well. You're not really sending it to him. Like you're just kind of like, well, I can't get rid of it. May as well desensitize yourself to
Yeah.
it. And so like I was thinking about that as we were talking, because that's something I've done repeatedly in different aspects of my life. And I don't think we as people know we do that either. I think me and somebody were talking about that, how we tend to like desensitize ourselves, and using like accountability groups as a way of like continuously desensitizing ourselves.
Yeah.
Because like we can tell people but not change. But the fact that we're telling people, we trick ourselves into thinking that that's okay, even though we're not changing.
I think we, excuse me, I think that's a good way to say it, desensitizing. I think another way would be like normalizing it or minimizing it.
Yeah.
And I could see that with things like insecurity or fear. Like you're like, I fear this and it kind of takes over my life. But if it makes it if I kind of normalize it,
Yeah.
a lot of times people will do that with addictions.
Yeah.
And they'll make it, it's normal, it's little, it's just this much. It's just this time. I only use it to deal with this. The problem with that is it becomes part of your DNA. It becomes part of your culture.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just stay there. It kind of, when you minimalize it or you desensitize it or normalize it, it becomes smaller but stronger.
Yeah.
And it just gets stronger
Yeah.
until it's ready to come out a little bit more. So it's not truly dealing with it.
Yeah.
It's more like letting it,
Infect.
yeah,
It's like
finding a
that-
safe space in your heart
to allow
and get
that.
strong.
Yeah, and it's annoying because like just like you said, it finds a safe space in the heart.
Yeah.
Like if a person is doing that and they're a committed believer, then they're taking that attitude into the congregation. They're
Yeah.
taking that attitude into a group of believers that it could affect them as well. Maybe not like infect them, but like I say infect like as it's a disease, but like it probably won't do the same thing for them. Like
Yeah.
they won't do the same thing, but like those people could try and help them with this, even though they're normalizing it, and then end up being hurt more out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like you said, it kind of grabs hold of part of the heart and then like festers, and then that could just be more of a problem later on to everyone else around it in the church as well.
Yeah, actually, I heard I don't think, one of the podcasts I listened to is Andy Stanley. I listened to a ton of them, so I hope I'm getting this right because I didn't prep for it. But and I don't even know if it's his quote or somebody else's, but it's, and I'm probably butchering it, so I apologize, like he's listening. But he said something, if you don't face your fears go into the basement or the attic, and they start lifting weights.
Yeah.
And they get stronger.
Yeah.
So if you don't face them correctly, it doesn't, you
Wow.
know. So but good news
There
is
is
there
a
is
way
a
out of
solution.
it.
There is a real solution.
Yeah.
We're just talking about ways that,
Yeah, we
and these
kinda,
could be anything.
Yeah, I think we were kind of going on of a way of like trying to, I guess, make it easier for people, because like it's one thing to bring up like insecurities, but like
Yeah.
like ways that it affects you is a little different. Like I think some things I tend to accidentally normalize or desensitize.
I think we all
myself to.
do. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's other things where you're like, no, I just don't bring it up, and I will handle it on my own.
Yeah.
And then there's other things where I will accidentally find myself being like, no, I'm dumping it on somebody.
Yeah.
And none of those are good. And I guess that's the main point we were trying to get across.
And a lot of it's pride too. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
normal human emotion
Yeah,
that
and I think
needs
that's a
to be
big part in
checked.
every part of those. Like mainly I need to do it myself, but I think it's in every aspect of that too.
Yeah. I have here in my notes that, why are we afraid to take this stuff to God? A lot
Yeah.
of it's pride, but I have in parentheses, he already knows, by the way. So you're not telling him anything.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not going to shock God by, hey, God, listen, I'm dealing with this. He's not shocked. He knows. But he loves us anyway. We kind of put this barrier up ourselves. We're
Yeah.
like, you know what? God doesn't want to deal with it. God, I can hide it from, none of that's true.
Yeah.
But the good news is the Bible does have a way for us to deal with this. So,
Yeah. I think my answer, in short terms, because
Yeah.
I remember this question being asked in small group, and I remember 'cause when we were in small group, like there wasn't a lot of feedback on this one.
Yeah.
I think because it's so personal.
it's a thinking exercise for
Like,
sure.
whenever you think about it, you're like, why the heck do I not do it? And some people could just say, like, well, I just don't pray that often. And that's a valid response to this kind
Right.
of question. But mine was like, because they're my emotions and
Yeah.
my problems, and I'm not going to let somebody else handle my problems.
That's the culture.
And-
That's the man up
and
thing.
And I
Yeah.
know, when I wrote that down, I was like, oh, crap. Like, and I do that on like a daily. Like, just the other day, I was thinking, I work at a coffee shop, and like, I think I've split like 50-50 on mentalities. Like,
Okay.
there's some mentalities where I want to be that man that is content with a low-end job as long as he's happy.
Yeah.
And as long as he's like content with where God puts him.
Right.
Because like you see a lot of examples in the Bible where like they're not exactly like kings. Like sure, there's some that are legitimate kings.
Yes.
But there's some that are like, okay, there's these humble fishermen, like
Right.
or just a tax collector that at the time nobody liked.
Yeah.
So it's like They were obviously they probably weren't amazing because they weren't with Jesus yet, and they still weren't amazing after.
Right.
But like, they were content with where they're at, and I struggle with either being like wanting to be content and purposefully stay in a coffee shop
Okay.
to be like, this is who I am, like not the coffee, but like this is where God puts me. I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah.
And then I struggle with, no, I need to like get a career.
Okay.
And I need to make more money so I can benefit God that way. But like I just bounce back and forth, and it ticks me off.
I need to make a mental note. I think we could do a sermon on
whole
that,
sermon
or
on
a podcast.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you're trying to figure out your identity,
Yeah.
and you're yeah, I get it. Okay, yeah, I
It's
don't want to get too
frustrating.
far down
Yeah,
that rabbit hole,
we'll
but
we'll go on that one later. But like, yeah, like when we're going on this subject, absolutely, that's a definite struggle.
what do you do with that? Yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Well, that's perfect. So I did have some scripture that,
Indeed, you did.
and I have, I think it's the New Living. Anyways, I'm going to read it. If it's different, read yours as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's going to be in 1 Peter 5:5-7.
Follow along, peeps.
And it says this: in the same way, you who are younger must accept the authority of the elders, and all of you, dress yourselves in humility as you relate to one another. For God opposes the proud. We talked about pride, right?
Yeah.
God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time he will lift you up in honor. Verse 7, give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares for you. Do you have a different version, or do you have anything?
Similar, but it is different. I can read it in case, but yeah, it was 5-7. Yeah. In the same way, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. All of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your cares on him because he cares about you.
So I feel that this scripture gets used a lot in Christian circles, and I think it's almost the canned response for, hey, I'm dealing with this, dealing with that, and I think it's a good scripture for that, for sure. But I think they focus so much on just cast your cares on God, give your worries to God.
Yeah.
And while that's true, you can't tell someone that's hurting or that's dealing with this addiction or depression, you can't just say cast your cares. Because I broke it down into 3 parts. The first part is verse 5. Well, I guess it's in verse 6. It says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, and at the right time he will lift you up in honor. The first part is humility. We can't just cast we just can't cast it on God and say, deal with it. Please help me. I can't deal with this part of my life. Coming to him in true humility is saying that I can't do any of this. I'm trying this. You can't just give your anxiety to God and say, God, you take my anxiety, I'm going to take care of everything else. I mean, you can, but that's not going to work. You have to completely come to him humble and not proud. You have to say, God, you need to take all of it. The good, the bad, especially the bad. But I feel that it's like, hey, cast your addiction on God. Cast your fear on God. What else? Cast your insecurities on God. No, the first part is humble yourself. First, come to him humbly. Then, give your worries to God. You can't do it the other way around. It's like when I don't know the 12 steps of addiction, but I know in the early stages you have to completely give up everything. You have to accept that you have no power in this situation. So I wanted to break it up. First, humble yourselves. Second, give your worries to God. And then the third is that give all your worries to God, for he cares about you. It doesn't say just give all your worries and cares to God. It has that purposely in there that he cares for you, because it's not like you you give this to him so he has something on you. It's not like that. It's he does it because he cares for you. There's no other reason. There's nothing else. So I don't know. What say you on that?
Well, I was looking up because we were talking about humility. That's the big one.
Maybe I should have slowed it down a little bit.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
I was listening while also going into.
I know.
a different
Yeah.
thing.
No, it's all good.
Yeah, but like we talked about and mentioned humility, like in this context, and looking at like even in verses ahead of it, like putting context in where these verses are at, like Peter's addressing like how one. Like in chapter 5 and I think through verse like 4, he's kind of addressing like how the leaders of the church and just elders in general should be shepherding and leading their flock.
Right.
He actually uses that exact analogy in I think verse 2. But then like likewise he's going towards the younger people, so like the youth.
Hi, youth.
Yeah, you guys and us, or me and
Youths.
him. And it's important he touches this on the younger generation because you're always going to be younger than somebody else.
Yes.
And so like in kind of putting that comparison of like you need to be humble towards the people that God places above you and that God places for you to shepherd you.
Yeah.
This should be the same mentality as the cares that you have. Cast them, be humble to God and bring them to him. Like I mentioned it last time, I think Hebrews 13:17, where it talks about like being a blessing to the people God places above you because that will benefit you in the long run.
Right.
Like in this sense, like be humble to God, be humble to the people that he puts above you in this situation. Because in the long run, like being able to cast those cares on God and being humble with him, that will benefit you.
Definitely, yeah.
Like it's not gonna like hurt you, I guess it would be a good way. Like if you're just mixing the Hebrews 13:17 and then this passage right here, like if you were to mix those, like you're being humble with God. That's the act of like submitting in Hebrews 13 to like obeying whoever was above you. It's
Yeah.
like you're humbling yourself to whoever is above you.
Yeah.
And then going into the casting your cares, like you're probably going to cast your cares to somebody who's a little more wiser, and God is the wisest of them all. So like it would only make sense to cast those cares and those issues on somebody who created everything. And so yeah, that would be my 10 cents.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then throwing in like arrogance, we throw the word humble around, and I was looking at the word arrogance, and I was trying to find the origin of it because I looked it up a long time ago, and there's different origins to it. I don't know which one was which.
Okay.
The one I was reading was that it was like it was, the origin was arrogare.
Okay.
But I looked it up and it was different. But I guess the context of that was like it's saying stuff without knowing.
Oh, okay.
And so you're not saying so, but like your actions and your mentality towards things is more of a mocking mentality, because you're like, if you've met an arrogant person, they can say everything without knowing what they're saying.
Yeah.
And like going back to, I think, like last time when we were in Philippians,
Right.
like talking about, I think it was Philippians. Were we in Philippians last week?
We've
been kind of bouncing around,
Yeah.
I guess. But we talked about like a wicked man like shoots arrows and then says he's joking.
That was in Psalms.
Yeah, okay.
Or
yeah.
Proverbs.
Proverbs.
I don't know Proverbs.
I know.
I've slept since then.
I even have another one, from. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over.
No,
the place
this
right
is
now.
great. This is great context, and I do kind of want to touch on that humility versus arrogance thing.
Yeah, and I wanted to do a study on it. I really want to do a study on that.
Yeah.
Because I think, sorry, high schoolers, and I was a high schooler once too. Just being a high schooler means you're always arrogant. That's just part of the nature of being a high schooler, and that also applies to college students looking up to older generations.
Yeah.
It just happens. It's just part of the thing.
We all think we're ready for the next step.
Yeah, and then we get
Before
slapped
we
with
are.
some reality from an older generation, and it never works. So, Yeah, I can't find it. I know it's I think it's Proverbs 73.
Well, if you want to look it up, I'll talk.
Yeah.
It's interesting that I do find that humility or being humble is almost looked down as like a weakness, and it truly takes more strength to live in humility than you would think. It takes. I kind of look at it as like S tier, like traits. Like if you can finally nail that humility, you're like, all right,
Yeah.
cool, because that's one of the hardest ones to do. Because it does take a lot more strength to not when you can. That's Jesus's whole. I mean, he was literally he was God's son, and he came as a servant. So if that's not just the picture of humility, then I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't really know what is. So
I think. Yeah,
we're all trying
absolutely.
to live that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I did find it.
Oh,
I
good.
did.
All right.
And it was in Psalm instead
Okay,
of
cool.
Proverbs. But this is Psalm 73, and it's mainly going to be like 8 through 12, I think,
Okay.
because that touches what I was trying to get
Would you say
across.
Psalms 3?
73, 8 through 12. Of
Okay.
course, the whole book is amazing, but this one specifically is
I'm
where.
ready. I'll find it. 73, 8 through 12.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you guys have a Bible, turn around. Oh, that's funny. It's not recording. Oh, I just did. Oops.
Take it away.
Oops.
All right. Go ahead and read it.
Cool beans. Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah. Oh well. Well, going into Psalm 73, they mock and they speak maliciously. They arrogantly threaten oppression.
Do you need to?
They set their mouths against the heaven, and their tongues strut across the earth. Therefore, his people turn to them and drink their overflowing words. The wicked say, "How can God know? Does the Most High know everything?" And that's like in quotations. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Look at them, the wicked. They are always at ease, and they increase their wealth. And like looking at this context, it sounds horrible. Like the first bit of it, going from 73, like 1 to I think 7.
Right.
It kind of talks about almost like a form of gluttony. Like the verse right before that in 7 was like their eyes bulge out from fatness. The the imaginations of their hearts run wild. Like they are just kind of just doing what they want. And then you throw in verse 8. It's like they mock and they speak maliciously, and they arrogantly threaten oppression. And like I think one thing I wrote in here in one of my like quiet times was like with this verse specifically, like you look at oppression, it's like oppression is subjective. Like
Right.
especially nowadays, we can definitely see different areas where oppression, people throw the word oppression a lot.
Yeah.
Or oppressed. And so like looking at it, like oppression like is just subjective, especially in this context. And then these arrogant people, these people speaking maliciously and mocking, they will mock what they don't know.
Yeah.
And like that oppression, that since they don't know anything, like they're mocking what they can, like that oppression is in every area of what they speak to. Like whether they speak to a believer, whether they speak to non-believers, like they will speak like to try it. And so when we bring up I guess I'm just kind of going down a rabbit trail. But
No, that's fine.
That really kind of addresses like how like vile, like arrogant like actions are, or just the idea of arrogance. Like look at them, the wicked. They always are at ease, and it's just like they're wicked. Like God
Yeah.
straight up calls the people who actively indulge in their arrogance as
Yeah.
wicked. And so like when we're going back to this verse over here in 1 Peter, like if we're going against like being or we're going to be humble, like we're actively trying not to mock and take things very seriously.
Right.
All the way down to the point of like lowering our status to God, because God created us, God's the creator, and acknowledging that and speaking on what we do know. And
Yeah.
we do know that God created us. So like why try and put a posture of something else?
Yeah.
So
It's to our own detriment, that's for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
Like, God opposes the proud. Stop being prideful. It's normal to be prideful, but put it aside.
Yeah, it's human nature. I
Yeah.
think like it's
But I
yeah,
think we almost need to have that. I mean, if humility came so naturally, it wouldn't be so profound when we were able to find it and bring it to God.
that's true. Yeah,
You know, it's got to be a decision to, to actually give ourselves up to Him. It can't be. I mean, I guess that's the whole basis of free will. So it is human nature to be proud, but that's why that decision has to be made prior to casting all our cares on Him.
yeah,
Is so. It's counterculture. It's counter human nature. It's counter, but so is everything that Jesus is. It's counter, but it's so. That's why it's so life changing too. That's why there's no solution to it, to the emptiness to living without Jesus.
yeah.
So
Go
ahead.
Oh yeah. When I was at Challenge, we do a thing called Campus E, where we go out on campus. It's called campus evangelism. Is what the E stands for. And one of the questions there, like as you're trying, because it's like a training ground for sharing for evangelizing and sharing the gospel to people. But one of the questions was like, what causes all the world's problems, and is there a solution to all of those problems? I guess that's two questions.
Okay.
But like, a lot of people like to throw around the pride or like greed or a lot of that stuff. And yeah, those do cause world problems. Like that's true. But like I think the underlying fact on all of those were they're people and people are sinful.
Yeah.
And so like on top of knowing, hey, we need to be humble with God. Like there's like a thin line that I feel like it's a thin line that all of us, when we humble ourselves to God, we also have to be giving ourselves grace in that area.
Yeah.
Because like if you beat yourself up, then you're going to go the opposite direction too, and so that stops you. That brings in more pride, and so like ultimately, pride and a bunch of other things correlate with just sin in general, and that's part of the reason we struggle. And then you brought up like a solution, and that's what clicked those questions in my head, because like the second question after that, because we allude that like, or we point out that like people are the problem,
Right.
and sin is the reason people are the problem.
Yeah.
And then like we go into like, is there a solution for everyone? And a lot of people like to think that like when we ask that, a lot of people tend to go like at least all the people I've talked to, they would say like you'd be like, well, no, like obviously it's still happening.
Yeah.
And they kind of like take like solution as like it's concrete, like it's already going to happen. If there was a solution, all of us would have found it by now. And so like that's typically how people view that question. But then like if you think of a solution, you don't always get the solution to things. Like just like if you look at a math problem, you don't always get it right away.
Right.
Like sometimes you have to ask people for help in that area. And like as believers, I know I've had to ask for people to help me in that area. And then looking at this context here, like casting our cares to God, like that's the solution right there. Like that's in and of itself borderline.
It is. But I get what you're saying. Like, I think sometimes when you're talking to people about the world's problems, it gets too big because they think of the whole world. So I was actually having this conversation with my wife today, just talking about what ails you or what troubles people, what relationships are struggling, and generally the solution is, we say it's Jesus, but I always like thinking like this, like think of like an argument or maybe some chaos in your life or some disagreements or some area of your life that's just not going well, right? Between you and somebody else or just you in general. What would that look like if either you or the other person was a little bit more Christ-like? And, we were talking in the context of marriage, like, why are so many marriages failing? And we look at you're like, well, this person's hard to live with, and this person does this and this. But what would it look like if, 2 years prior, or even a week prior, or even that the other person, or maybe both people, were more Christ-like. Maybe they exhibited a little more love or humility or whatever it is. What Christ possesses, what if we possess just a little bit more of that? I think of that in my own life. Like, anytime I've had issues or problems, or what would it look like if I was a little more Christ-like? And as Christians, when we decide to follow Jesus, it's not a switch. Like his disciples didn't, when they followed him, they didn't just become converted at that moment, but they followed him, and through following him and learning about him and being with him, they slowly became more Christ-like. I mean, we never get there because it's a lifelong pursuit, but they became more Christ-like, and that's kind of what we're called to do. It's not a switch, but that's what Jesus calls us to do, isn't it? It's not like you believe in him. He says, follow me. So what would it, that's why I challenge anyone that's like the world's problems. Think about your problems. What would your problems look like if you, or maybe the people real close to you, were more Christ-like?
Yeah.
So that I don't know, that's just a little
and when
off
you,
subject, but
no, yeah. When you asked that, I was like, if it was the other person, I would immediately be irritated because like my own pride would get in the way. And I know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure I would disagree wrongly. I want to point that out. I'm gonna say something. I would disagree with a lot of how Jesus would handle things, but that's just because I know I'm in the wrong and I don't want to be.
well, that's when you, that's exposing a scab. That's exposing a wound, which is hard healing, but it's
And so like when you said that, I was like, that sucks. Like that's a horrible thing to open up. So but
it is, but it's
the truth.
Then you think, then you're like angry at that person. Then you're like, okay, this person's acting more Christ-like. What would it look like for me
to act?
And you're like, well, that would require me to less of me and more of him.
Yeah, exactly.
But
and
isn't
that comes back into being humble again?
Isn't that the goal? More of him and less of me.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like,
change isn't easy.
We're talking about being humble. Like, in order to handle situations like that, like in this situation, like humility in this scenario would be like the opposite of the mentality that I just was talking about. Like,
right?
Like, you heard it first, man.
In this scenario where Levi's arguing with someone who's being more Christ-like.
Yeah. But like, I feel like even as most believers would be irritated if Jesus, like, because I don't think he'd be rude. I think he would be very like respectful and loving, and that would irritate me. I'd be like, no, I deserve worse. But like, that'd just be me, though. I'm getting on a rant here. But.
That's all right. I feel like in most arguments, it turns into a winner and loser.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
not
and
really.
Then you already know Jesus won, so you're like, well, I have to at least put some fight. But then you're like, why am I fighting? I believe in you. Like,
well, I hate getting in arguments with people where there is a winner and loser, because it's like, it shouldn't be like that. It should be, all right, what benefits both of us?
Yeah.
What benefits all, Yeah.
And then looking at this situation, like, you're trying to benefit Christ in the way you handle that argument, the way you handle this. And then you're like, well, crap, my pride is getting in the way of this. And so, like, this is like a whole sermon topic. I think it is. I think it could be.
I'll take note. I'm writing some up for the fall.
Nice.
So, but honestly, that's something that needs to be broken up, because that is like, when that exposes in yourself, which it happens, it's not just you, it's all of us.
Yeah.
It's like, ouch, okay.
Yeah. And then, like, going back, like, casting your cares, that's the main topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got off on a little.
Yeah, I figured we should try and at least bring it back. We're doing good on time, by the way.
We're doing all right, but we probably need to
wrap it up.
Come to a point.
That's good. Yeah. So I guess, like, the big thing, we're also wanting feedback on this, right? Like a little bit of feedback on this one, because we're talking about insecurities and other things, and how, like, that comes into bringing that to Christ. And so...
Yeah, any of this is good feedback, because I know I personally deal with, I listed a bunch of them. Some of them are worse than others. But yeah, let us know, comment, message, like, and do all that.
Yeah,
But
do
for
all
real,
that.
I'd love to hear from, I do hear, and I'm sure you do too. I hear from students about things like this, and I just, I don't want to give them a canned response on my way to lunch.
Yeah.
I want them to know that, hey, this is not, give your cares on, hey, cast your cares on God. He loves you. See ya. No, it's like, hey, you have to admit that you can't do it by yourself,
Yeah.
because you can't, because I can't, because Levi can't, because Pastor
And
Caleb
no one else
can't,
can do
Mike
it for
can't.
you at the same time except for him as well.
Yeah.
So like you can't, knowing that you can't do it, don't push it on somebody else either except
Yeah.
for Christ.
You talk to people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
people that love you.
Yeah, and make sure that like when you're going through this situation, try and like find the ways that you can interject Christ into this. Not like, what would Jesus do? I mean, yeah, maybe that would work too. But like like but like try and figure out ways to like give him that emotion. Like I know as guys specifically, like I try to like, and I catch myself doing it in prayer. Like I will kind of stop myself and then kind of gloss over things. And
Yeah.
like, crap. Sorry, God. Like now I got to go back into this
Yeah.
with a full heart and being able to like be, I want to say like raw with Jesus. Like don't like you can be honest with him, but like be like yourself. Be the part that like nobody else can see, because that's what God sees, and that's what God wants you to be
Yeah.
with him. And so even if it means like I have to yell like in the middle of a yard because I need God to be there.
Yeah.
Like showing that vulnerability and that dependability, or like the fact that you need him, is being dependent on him, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the word I meant to say. But like having that dependent like attitude on God and humbling yourself low enough to be that way. And so
Yeah. Two things on that. You mentioned like you can come to God with whatever, he already knows, first of all.
yeah.
So if you try to like package it up in a pretty thing that's like, okay, God, I'm kind of dealing with this, but I think I got it. He knows. He knows. He knows you're most raw. So number one, he knows already. Number two, he can handle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can handle it. It's not like, all right, God, I'm dealing with this daily. I'm dealing with this all the time, and it is destroying. Let me get it a little underhand, and then I'll start going to God with it. I'll start coming to
Yeah.
church. I'll start to just give it all to him.
Yeah.
If you're, we talked, I think we did a sermon series where, they were talking about their posture towards God. Be respectful and make sure you're calm. And it's like, I get that, and it's not a bad thought process, but come to God all the time, anytime, with whatever you have.
Yeah.
He already knows. He can handle it.
Yeah. And if like in the church, like if you're in a stable, like obviously biblically sound church, like even the parts before this, like going to your elders.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that is a very big, and yes, go to your like church elders, obviously. They're pretty awesome. But like even the people that God places above you, like Andy to the students.
I love you guys.
Yeah. Or like going to people like maybe 10 years older than you, like maybe even less than that, but like respect them and respect the knowledge that they were given to by God, and then respect that they also have that because they're part of the community as well.
Yeah, that's a good
And
call out.
Like adding the context before what we read, like God placed those people there in the church, and then hopefully, like God willing, that they are committed believers, and if they're committed believers, this is going to be as important to them as it is to you. And so like coming to them with your problems, not with your problems, but like letting them help you in the process of giving that to God, like that is so helpful.
Yeah.
And so like don't do it alone. Like if you have to bring in an older person to help you with this, sure, but like bring it to God is the ultimate goal in this situation. And sometimes you need that extra push
Yeah.
from an old person.
Well, that's great. I don't have anything on that.
Yeah.
That feels like a
Yeah.
good solid episode.
That does.
All right. Well, we thank you for joining in. If you've been here this long, that means maybe you like us. So
That's true. Yeah. Hopefully
like
you do.
and subscribe, comment, and above all of that stuff, though, come if you got questions or just want to talk. That's kind of why we're
Absolutely.
here. So
Yeah. And if you want to know more about us too, like those are questions that I think we're willing to answer.
Oh, yeah.
Like more personal side of things. Cause like we can tell you about like our hobbies, but like us in general,
yeah,
like I think we're willing to,
Yeah,
I
that's
can
no
speak for
problem.
myself, but like I assume Andy's on there as well.
yeah, we can do something like that too. I
Yeah.
got no problem with that.
Yeah. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, and
Yeah.
we love you. Well, I love you.
Yeah. I
And
don't. Just kidding. I do.
Love you guys. Have a great week.
Sweet.
Peace out.
Yeah. See ya.